Yesterday's Hindu had an article by a civil aviation expert who has seen a lot of service in the aviation sector. And the title of that article was "The Rot Starts at the Top of the Aviation Ladder." Today's Hindu had another article, again by a very senior civil aviation expert, someone who has experience in the domain, in that domain, and his article was titled, "India needs a sincere aircraft accident investigation." These two articles have to be seen against the background of the Ahmedabad air crash. I wouldn't be presumptuous to paraphrase any of these articles, because these articles and what are commented there in those articles are the result of domain experience by those very distinguished people. I would comment as a citizen, not as an expert, that is evident, but I feel impelled to comment on this because of what I see and what I have referenced. Now, when I say that, I've also said it before, that the citizen is at a disadvantage in getting information. It's so difficult. And I suspect there is always a cover-up in the fact that a citizen does not have information. Be that as it may, I would make these comments on what I have tried to read and understand, because as a citizen, I feel it is my duty to comment on certain aspects of the subject. And therefore, I would say my subject is something like this: a citizen looks at this systemic rot against the background of the Ahmedabad aircraft crash. So, I am trying to examine what are the glaring deficits in the system. Now, what is the system? Whenever an aircraft takes off or lands, it is not just the pilot and the aircraft. There is a whole system working. It has to work. The system has to work. And there are various entities. At the head of all the system is DGCA, Director General of Civil Aviation. There is, of course, the Airport Authority. There are individual airlines. All these have their own mandates, but everything that happens is under the DGCA. This is the case in all countries. The FAA in the USA, Federal Aviation Authority in the USA, is a very powerful organization. Now, what is the remit or the mandate of DGCA in India? I will put it in one word: everything connected with aviation. The DGCA certifies aircraft, airports, pilots, engineers, issues flying licenses and air operators certificates. Just as examples, many more. It audits airlines, flight schools, maintenance centers, drafts aviation rules and standards, and all these necessary civil aviation requirements, interfaces with ICAO, UN ICAO, Civil Aviation, International Civil Aviation Organization, to enforce global norms. This is just a sample of the charter of the DGCA. The DGCA, whatever name it is called, is a technical post, technical, and not for anyone to come in. And the examples of those leading airlines, Singapore, for example, South Korea, they're all right at the top in the ICAO rankings. We are 48th. Singapore is number 1. All of these are headed by aviation experts, technical people. Singapore's head of civil aviation is Han Kok Juan, a trained professional in aviation policy and operation, and well respected and regarded in the international aviation circles. I have referenced it, and I find that in many of these conferences, Han Kok Juan is a speaker and probably takes classes, workshops for various professionals. The USA's head is not only an aviation expert, but a former pilot, engineer, senior professional in the aerospace sector. And the appointment is Senate confirmed. So it's a very serious technical post that heads all this civil aviation and security of people. France has got an aerospace engineer pilot at the top, and he is also an accident expert. So this is the kind of staffing of this most important post in the system. I said earlier that the system is headed by DGCA. What have we here? We have an IAS officer who only until recently was in the agriculture ministry, looking after farmers' welfare. He is the DGCA. I looked at all the biodata of all these IAS officers for the past more than that, 10 years, 15 years. I find that the DGCA post is a kind of rotational post reserved for IAS officers to fit in whenever these promotions come in, handled by the Department of Personnel. So when an IAS officer gets to a stage where he has to go into another slot because of the promotions and things like that, this too is a post. So a part of their recruitment policy, all these IAS officers call themselves generalists. That is a euphemistic form of describing what they are, because really the truth is that they are jack of all trades but master of none. This is the real fact. This is the fact. So when the DGCA, the most important official of this system, is headed by an IAS officer who knows next to nothing in the aviation, contrast this with the pilot, contrast with the senior professional, senior engineer, senior aviation policy and operations expert in other countries, whether it is Singapore or the USA, and you will find that that is a rot in the system, right at the head of the system. So if we are sincere, if we are honest, there's got to be change there, a change there. We've got to be honest with ourselves. On the other hand, if we are dishonest and not really going into all this, then such inane statements like that are made by ministers soon after the Ahmedabad crash, that accidents, after all it is an accident. We've got the best security systems in the world, and we will look at that and we'll appoint inquiries. But the fact is that any inquiry has to be not for blaming that particular incident, but what are the remedies, what are the lessons to be learned. So the inquiry is not confined to that particular tragedy or particular operation, but to the remedies that are called for the future. That is the difference. The emphasis should be on remedies, not on fault finding. Quite often, what is seen, first of all, there is so much of opaqueness in this whole business. I'll tell you why. What I saw, there was sort of a lot of cover up, but the easy way out is to blame somebody like the pilots or something, but not look at this whole thing for remedies. Since all these accidents and the inquiries ipso facto brings in professionals, highly trained professionals from other countries. In this case, US FAA has sent a top representative. UK, because UK nationals have been killed. UK has sent a top professional. And I guess many others are in the picture. Boeing has sent their own separate professionals. So they will come out with something. The only thing is, ultimately it is the government and the DGCA and the AAIB in charge of the investigation. AAIB is the authority in charge of investigations of accidents of this kind. But the fact is that, irrespective of the fact that it may be statutory or whatever, they are not independent of government. And there lies another point there. that in the DGCA structure as it is now, there is a conflict of interest. The DGCA is the regulator, but the DGCA also works under the Ministry of Civil Aviation, which is understandable, who are also interested in expanding to new routes, expanding the fleet and things like that. Therefore, there is a contradiction that DGCA, who's the regulator, gets mixed up with the growth of the aviation sector. These can be working in opposite directions. Sometimes you may have to slow the growth and expansion in view of the regulatory structure not keeping in pace. So that is one contradiction. The AIB, which I mentioned just now, is in charge of the investigation but still works under the Ministry of Civil Aviation. It is not independent, like the United States, where this is entirely independent. No one can really influence. No one. That is the structure of most of these top airlines, including Singapore. I said top airlines. I refer to the top airlines I have looked up. Singapore, UAE, South Korea, all of them have independent structures, modeled, shall I say, on FAA. And that's where they are, right at the top, and our ranking has still to come up. Ours is the 48th rank. There are other glaring weaknesses in the DGCA structure. And I'm slowly trying to explain what I meant by saying there is a rot in the structure, in the system. There is a rot in the system. Out of about 1,600 staff in the DGCA, less than 50% are technical experts. This means others are just pen-pushing characters. This is a technical field, absolutely technical field, and you have less than 50% technical experts. Now, when I give these figures, please understand that there is a caveat, that I as an individual have tried to search here and there because I don't have information. And for me to go after the Right to Information Act and get various information would be a steep mountain to climb, because these things, whatever comments I have to make when this whole thing is contemporaneous, current, and not after about 3 months from now. So I have this disability. I might be wrong here or there, but then you get the drift. That's all that is required. As far as I know, over 800 posts are vacant in the DGCA, including critical inspector roles. I might be wrong here and there, but then you can't, in a very, very important and security-related, security of passengers, security-related matter, you can't leave things like that. So the question would be, what is the regulator doing? Those things. All these things should come under the scanner if a good report is made. There is no permanent cadre, which means most of these people are on deputation from various ministries. Therefore, they would not have loyalty to this organization, which is one very important thing. Whether it is a DGCA organization or a corporation, there should be have that sense of loyalty to the organization. These are all from deputation. And this whole thing is all Delhi-centric, in and around Delhi. Now, that's not the real thing, because there should be a regional presence of the DGCA. So the nub of the whole thing is that the DGCA lacks real autonomy like the FAA. It is just a kind of adjunct to the Civil Aviation Authority. No matter what you say that it has a statutory basis or whatever, they don't have an independent status. And now these independent status and all that does not come through some kind of legislation. You've got to be honest, and that is lacking. But what I mean is that you've got to be honest with yourself, not paper over these things as has been done. My mind goes back to the Mangalore crash. If I remember right, it was somewhere in 2010 or something. That is the tabletop runway and all that. First of all, that inquiry report took a pretty long time to come, and that killed a lot of passengers, 150, 160 passengers. Now, serious lapses were there, and just 5 or maybe 10 years later, the same thing, an eerie similarity, happened in Kozhikode. Another crash, the same tabletop runway, and the same things happened. So this is frightening, just to think that even after that, in the first one, the Mangalore crash, the main recommendation was that there should be a chief aviation authority. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. And then came the Kozhikode crash. Each of these crashes, each of these are not acts of God. Each of this crash, that's why it was sad to read the minister, one of the ministers saying, oh, accidents happen. No, they don't happen. Only acts of God, which means a sudden, for all to see, some kind of lightning or huge storm and all that. That doesn't normally happen. All these accidents are a failure of the system, a failure of people. And therefore, when you look at it, you have to look at the remedies, at the lessons to be learned. It is for remedies, not for fault finding and going after those people, the pilots and things like that. You have to look at it, what are the future? This is what I see. As I see it, there is no immediate solution to this thing. I only wish if only we were honest, if only we were inspired by this thought that we should see that some remedies and lessons should come out of it, and with expedition come out with these inquiries so that we can prevent further tragedies. If we don't do that, the very sad conclusion is that this may happen again.